Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. As I am recording this for you, I'm just looking out of the window, actually in my husband's office. I'm recording it here because it's quieter, and I'm looking out on the sunshine in our backyard. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. I don't usually work on the weekends, but it just ended up being that this was the best time to record. My kids were pretty sick this week. We had a lot of doctor's appointments, so it didn't get recorded, and I'm actually just feeling really relaxed and good recording this for you. I have a walk after I record this with someone I've never really met before, but she lives in the neighborhood and seemed cool. So we're taking a walk together, which I feel really excited about. So yeah, happy day. It's Saturday today, but it'll be Wednesday when you get this. Today, I will be sharing with you my perspective on everything that can be done to work fewer hours without sacrificing quality. And when I say everything that can be done to work fewer hours without sacrificing quality, I am very aware of what a big topic that is. And that's on purpose. I want actually to talk about this topic at a really high level today. I want to give you a lay of the land of everything that can be done. My belief is that one of the ways in which professionals in any field really add significant value is that they take these big, often amorphous problems and they break them down into discrete, organized chunks or pieces that can be understood and, more importantly, that can be acted upon. And I did this for sure when I was a consultant at McKinsey. This was a core part of why companies hire management consultants. A healthcare company or a bank or someone that made products would come to us and say that they were considering, for example, entering a new space, but they just weren't sure if it made sense for them. And they didn't even know how to answer that question. And McKinsey, I don't know about other consulting firms, but certainly they would think about how do we break this down in a really concrete and comprehensive way. So, what do we know, for example, about the potential revenue of the market? What do we know about the costs within the revenue? What do we expect the number of customers to be, and how much will each customer spend? And once you get granular enough, once you're dealing with a question like, for example, how much would each customer spend given the assumptions that we've made about the potential customers, then you can actually do something about that. That becomes a question that you can make a quantitative model on, or you can do qualitative analysis on. And my take is that one of my important jobs as a life coach, of course I do many things, but one of them is to do that same type of thing for my life coaching clients. My clients come to me with these really big, complex issues. Sometimes that question is, of course, itself very amorphous, like I'm just not feeling as satisfied as I'd like in my life. And sometimes the question itself is much more well-defined, like how do I work fewer hours without sacrificing quality? And like I said, part of how I add value is that I can break that problem down into everything that we could work on as comprehensively as possible. And then we can tackle that piece by piece now that we have handholds. So I have been thinking a lot recently about how to make sure I have as comprehensive a map as possible for how to help people reduce working hours without sacrificing quality. Of course, I've been doing this because I have been preparing for 10 Hours Back, which, if you have not heard, is a small group coaching program that I will be offering this spring to help a group of 10 professionals reduce their work week by 10 hours without sacrificing quality. But I've been thinking that I should talk about how I am approaching this high-level question of how to reduce working hours. And I wanted to do it for two reasons. One, of course, is that if you're interested in joining 10 Hours Back, you might be curious about what we'll be talking about. So this podcast should give you a really good overview of everything we'll be covering. Of course, we will be diving much deeper into each of them, and I will give you very specific exercises and concrete doable homework, and you'll get personalized coaching from me. But this should give you a kind of high-level lay of the land. And then even if you never join 10 Hours Back, which most of you listening to this will not, I wanted to share with you something that would give you significant value. And I think that when you have a comprehensive high-level overview like this, then you can actually see, where am I doing really well and where are the opportunities to intervene. The first step is always just to identify the problem. And so hopefully this will give you a solidly comprehensive picture of what to do. And along the way, I'm going to be sharing some specific examples of how I have applied these ideas to my clients and what has worked for them. So without any further ado, let's go. So from my perspective, if you are working in a way that is not working for you, if you are overly tired or burnt out at work, there are 3 things that can and often must be attended to. The first one is your vision. The second one is your actions. And the third one is your mindset. So I just want to introduce you to each of them and talk about why I think they matter. So the first one, as I said, is vision. Vision just means having a vision for what you want your life to look like and feel like, both inside of work and outside of work. And I use the words look like and feel like very consciously, because some people's visions will be very specific and concrete, like I will work in a sage green office and I will have oatmeal linen colored armchairs. And some people's visions will be more about feelings, like I will have plenty of energy and my nervous system will be calm and I won't feel in a rush and I will be proud of what I produce. And both are cool in my book. Though I will say, in general, the more specific, the better, especially when it comes to your vision for work. Typically, I ask my clients to identify things like when will they start working and when will they stop working in their dream scenario and when would it be lovely to take breaks? Because even if it seems pie in the sky, like your dream just seems completely impossible, it is way easier to work towards a specific vision than a more general one. And of course, in 10 Hours Back, we're going to do some very specific vision exercises together, and I will be asking more specific questions, but this hopefully gives you a general sense of it. And if the whole idea of a vision seems kind of like cliche and airy-fairy, look, just stick with me for a few more minutes. We're going to get very concrete as well, but I actually start with vision for a very specific reason. And that's because honestly, this journey to reducing your working hours without sacrificing quality, it is not easy. It is not at all easy. And not only is it kind of tricky in terms of the actions you have to take, there are new skills that you need to learn, new literal actions to take, but it's also quite a bit in terms of your brain and your emotions. So you're going to have some thoughts, you're going to have some anxieties, you might doubt yourself, you might get a little fearful. And to be clear, I don't say this to discourage you, because you can address all of it. In fact, that's why I built 4 months of coaching calls into 10 Hours Back, because I want to be able to coach you on these issues and I know you can overcome them. But I mention these difficulties because if you don't have something that you're excited about working towards, you may never overcome all that will be hard about this journey. So that's why vision matters. It gives you something that is worth going through all of this for. And the other thing that's worth naming about vision, as we're talking about it at a high level, is that developing a vision requires knowing what you want. And for some of you, that sounds obvious. Like, of course you need to know what you want. Why would you even bring that up? But I have found that very frequently, one thing that happens when people push for a long time, which for many people is just kind of their lived experience of being an adult, like you push through your desire to not do things every single day, all day. When you push a lot, you tend to get a little disconnected from yourself. You can start to lose track of what you even like or what is meaningful or what's fun besides really obvious kind of fast food fun like Netflix or Instagram. Both of the things are wonderful, but those are just things that are really easy to like. And of course, you'll probably always like those, but you'll probably also like other more subtle things, and you need to know those too. So part of even being able to develop a vision requires a skill of knowing what you do and don't like. I talked about more about that skill in my episode on authenticity, which is episode 2 of this podcast. But for those who need it, we're going to talk more about how to know what you do and don't want in 10 Hours Back. But here, as we're talking about vision, you might take a second to ask yourself, do I know what I want clearly for my work life and for my out of work life? And do I know in really specific terms what would be the absolute dream for me? And then you might also ask yourself, do I currently have the toolkit and the skills to know what I want, period? Or just am I kind of out of touch with that capacity at this point in time? And again, just identifying both your strengths and your opportunities is always the first step to figuring out what you'll do about it. Okay, so that's vision. That's the first of the 3 categories I mentioned. The second one that I want to talk about is action. You are, I'm sure, not shocked to hear that action will be required to reduce your working hours. But the key here, of course, is what action? For me, the 2 types of action to focus on are, first, actions that increase your effectiveness, and second, actions that decrease your hours. And again, maybe that sounds really obvious. Like, of course, we need both types of action if we want to decrease hours while keeping quality high. Of course, we're going to need to increase our effectiveness while decreasing hours. But defining it quite so precisely, I think helps us how to understand in a useful way, because there's more that I want to say and break down about each of these 2 categories. In terms of increasing effectiveness, the first thing I mentioned, I define effectiveness as the amount of high quality work you can do in a given period of time. So I'll say that again. Effectiveness is the amount of high quality work that you can do in a given period of time. So how much high quality work you can do in an hour, for example. And there are 2 big things that drive effectiveness. The first one is, are you working on the most important things? Are you working on the most important things? And the second one is, are you working on those important things with mental sharpness? So I'm just going to say those again. If you want to be effective, you need to do 2 things. You need to make sure you're working on the most important things, and you need to make sure that you are doing that with mental sharpness. So let's talk about this first one. Are you working on the most important things? That may sound like a basic question, but for many of my clients, honestly, we're not. If the important thing happens to be urgent and also easy, then yes, we are working on the most important things. But if the important thing is urgent and cognitively challenging, well, we'll get to it eventually. But we're probably going to procrastinate with easy, non-cognitively challenging things first, both urgent and non-urgent easy things. We're going to do that for quite some time first, and that will take up a large number of unnecessary hours in your day. And so once you actually get to that urgent and cognitively challenging thing, number one, you're not going to have great mental sharpness, which we're going to talk more about in a second, but also because you don't have that great mental sharpness, that cognitively challenging task will take you longer and it will be done with less high quality. And that is a huge part of why many people end up having to work late or on weekends. And that's just if the important task is urgent and cognitively challenging. But if the important task is not urgent and is cognitively challenging, you may never get to that task at all. And that might sound like not a big deal. It's not urgent, right? If it really had to get done, there'd be a deadline, right? But think about it. Many of the things that can add a bananas level of value to your team or your organization, that kind of deep, challenging, creative thinking that demonstrates leadership and gets promotions, many of those things no one ever asks for and no one is explicitly waiting for. So to give some examples, this would be something like figuring out how to give feedback to an employee that would both strengthen your relationship while also increasing their effectiveness. That kind of feedback is actually really cognitively challenging to figure out. Like, how do we even know what to say? So people put it off. Another example would be putting together a long-term plan that is creative and visionary for your project when everyone else on your team is super reactive and short-term. Again, that's hard to figure out. It's cognitively challenging and it is not urgent. So people are going to put it off. It could also be thinking about, what is the one thing you could do this quarter that would build a deeper, more supportive relationship with your key business client? Again, that is hard to figure out and people are going to put it off. And many of these things, as I said, no one's going to get mad if you don't do them. Nobody maybe even asked for them, but those are the things that drive immense value. And those are the things that can really distinguish you when it comes to things like promotions. So that's my pitch for making sure that you're doing the most important tasks. And of course, nobody's against doing the most important tasks, but also most of us are only doing the easy, urgent tasks in any kind of timely manner. And we're putting off those cognitively hard, urgent tasks, which ends up sort of making our days much longer than they actually need to be. And then when we have cognitively hard, non-urgent tasks, as I said, we typically don't even get to them. So I just wanted to introduce this to invite you to take a moment to ask yourself, number one, do I know at any moment the most important tasks, both the easy ones and also the cognitively challenging ones? And then how am I doing with important tasks that are cognitively hard but urgent? Do I put them off? And by then, of course, I've wasted time and am less mentally sharp. And then how am I doing with those tasks that are cognitively hard and not urgent? Do I get to them at all? And if you find the answer is, I'm not really great at doing this, there are lots of different ways to intervene. You might need to process all of your feelings of resistance to doing those tasks. You might need to manage your mind in various ways. You might need to just literally spend a bit of time when you're fresh thinking about what is important. And I will say, to give a really concrete example here, I had a client who, for her, just realizing that she was avoiding these cognitively challenging tasks, that was a game changer for her. Because in the past, when she worked a lot, she always thought it was because she just had too much work. The problem was the volume of work. She would often be working at night or sort of quite late in the day. She would often be working on the weekends. But over time, she realized, again, that the problem was just that she was avoiding that cognitively challenging work. She was wasting time on easy things, and then her day was gone, and then she had to work on the nights and on the weekends. So she was able to see that even the thought, I have so much work, that's why I need to work longer, that was a thought error. The truest thought was, I have so much work, so I need to prioritize effectively. Because truthfully, she actually just needed to do about 1 to 2 hours a day, usually on her most cognitively challenging tasks, in order to really sort of keep things moving and keep on top of the most important things. But look, as a typical office worker, even a successful office worker, which she totally was, her boss called her a rock star, she had just gotten a promotion, even people who are known as rock stars can spend their whole day or weeks avoiding what is cognitively challenging. And one of my favorite things to say about this story is that actually, even at the end of our time together, she wasn't perfect at it. She still would find herself putting off that cognitively challenging work, but she stopped, and this is really key, she stopped thinking that working longer was the solution to her problems. She realized what a thought error that was. She realized that she didn't really need longer. She just needed to organize herself to work smarter to actually get those cognitively challenging and important tasks done. She needed the mental sharpness and she needed to effectively address her priorities. So when she was feeling kind of discombobulated and overwhelmed, she could focus her brain on that very particular thing. Again, she didn't always do it perfectly, but if things went off the rails, she knew how to fix it. So that's the first way to work more effectively. You want to increase the amount of high quality work you do by actually knowing what's important to do and not BSing yourself that the cognitively easy work is the most important if it's not. The second key to working more effectively is asking, are you maximizing your mental sharpness? Having mental sharpness, which really just refers to having a brain that is able to think in a smart and creative way, it is hard to do. And if my whole extended discussion of cognitively challenging tasks just now completely exhausted you, like your body is exhausted, your brain is overwhelmed, then one thing you definitely need, and a big part of making sure you have mental sharpness, is going to be better recovery. Mental recovery and also physical and emotional recovery, because they are all linked, It's a huge part of mental sharpness. We are going to spend a whole week just focused on this in 10 hours back, and it's really going to be woven into everything we do every week. We're going to talk about recovery outside of your workday and work week, and also the recovery that you can be doing even within your workday. Because look, you cannot work effectively if you are not resting your brain and yourself, period. So if we do work together, if you join 10 hours back, or if you're ever coached by me one-on-one, do not freak out that I'm going to push you way too hard. The purpose of this is always for you to feel rejuvenated so you can give your best and most creative work to what you do. So in 10 hours back, of course, we're going to be doing different exercises. We're going to have homework assignments, making sure that when you are working with mental sharpness. We're going to have a 4-part model that helps you assess your mental sharpness so you can identify what to do about it. But overall, I do want you to know that there's a bunch of ways of working that you can implement to be better here. And there's a bunch of strategies you can implement on the recovery side as well. But I will give one really concrete example here that hopefully will be helpful to you, which is team. Being thoughtful about your email, Slack, and IM usage at work. There is nothing that will completely sap your mental sharpness and also just waste an enormous amount of time than poor technology hygiene, which is what I call it. We will be spending a whole week on 10 hours back on this, on technology hygiene. But honestly, I just think most white collar workers can get at least 5 hours back each week by being more intentional about their email and their Slack and their IM time alone, if not more time. So again, as we're talking about this, ask yourself, how often do I feel mentally sharp? And do I have ideas already on how to feel more mentally sharp? Typically, when I ask people that question, they have at least a couple ideas, but they may not be implementing them yet. And I do want to just say here, if in answering this question or in any of the questions that I've asked you, you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I have so many growth opportunities, please do not let that make you feel ashamed or embarrassed. I actually think this is very hard, and it can be so hard to do on your own. And so if you're struggling, I just want you to know that honestly, probably most people listening to this are struggling. It's so common. But the whole purpose of this podcast even is just to break the problem down so that you can see more precisely what your challenges are and what you can do about it. Okay, so all of the things that I just spoke about, making sure that you're working on what's actually important, and then also making sure that you're doing that important work with mental sharpness. Both of those are the types of actions that will increase your effectiveness, which is that first key category of actions. The second key category of actions that we need to focus on are actions that decrease hours. So there's a couple of levers to decrease hours. One of them, of course, is increasing effectiveness itself, because if you get the most important tasks done within a very manageable workday, you don't have to stay late. You can sort of naturally reduce your hours. But when we're looking to reduce hours, I also like to look at the main components of most people's workdays, which are meetings, email, and projects. So meetings mean, are there meetings you don't need to go to? And for some people, this is obvious. They're like, oh yeah, there's like 2 different meetings that I probably don't really need to be there for. And for other people, of course, all the meetings they're in are non-negotiable, and that's fine. It's just about exploring whether there are openings for you here. So that's meetings. The second one is projects. So when we're looking at your projects, do you need to be doing each project that you are doing now? If you said no to some projects, could you have better mental focus and energy and creativity for what does matter most to your organization? And again, we're not reducing hours to be selfish. We're reducing hours to free you up for your best, most insightful, and most creative work. And then the final one, email, again, could you reduce your time in your inbox? And I also include Slack and Instant Messenger and wherever you spend your technology time on at work in this category. Like I said, most people could get at least 5 hours back a week just by cleaning up their internet and technology hygiene at work. So like I said, we will have exercises and group coaching and homework on each of these categories in 10 hours back. But for now, it's worthwhile just asking yourself as we talk about each of these, where could I get some obvious quick wins, or maybe it takes a second to implement, but any wins from in terms of reducing my hours? Could it be from email? Could it be from projects? Could it be from meetings or something else? And the final thing I want to say here about reducing hours is that a solid amount of the actions here to reduce hours, my clients actually know what to do. Like, it might not be top of mind, but when I ask them specific questions and when I ask them follow-up questions, they can figure out what to do. And I say that to emphasize people often know the meetings they don't really need to attend. They know they're spending too much time in their inbox. They know they shouldn't take on that extra project. So at that point, it's not an action problem. It's a thoughts problem. They have thoughts about why they can't not attend that meeting or not be in their inbox so much. And so we actually need to address that. So that's the third category, thoughts. Thoughts can be analyses, interpretations, fears, anxieties. You can have thoughts about your actions, about your identity, about other people, and more. I actually think that thought-related work is about 50% of the work if someone wants to reduce their working hours without sacrificing quality. And 50% means that for some people, it's more. It could be 60%, 70% for some people. Because yes, for some people, the vision thing can be really tricky because they don't know what they truly want. And for other people, the actions can be tricky. Like maybe they really do need to change up some things in order to work more effectively. And there's kind of a sort of complex, iterative process of figuring out how to do that. But for many people, they just can't implement the obvious actions because they have so many thoughts about what it means. And if that seems shocking to you, that something like thoughts, something as, simple, quote unquote, as thoughts could be the reason why you're working more hours than you would prefer, well, your skepticism is why you're working more hours than you would prefer. So the idea that thoughts could be driving your problems at all can seem kind of amorphous. So I just want to give you one specific example from a recent client. So I had this client about a year ago who was a very specialized computer programmer. He was very skilled at what he did, and he was very frustrated because he was tired and burnt out. And he knew that part of the problem was that he was avoiding the most cognitively challenging work at his job. So then he had to work longer because he wasn't getting to the things he really needed to do. I think you're beginning to see some patterns here probably. And in fact, he sometimes found himself browsing the internet instead of working on these challenging projects. And the browsing was sort of a break, but it wasn't actually that restful, and it kind of made him feel guilty. And it was clear to me that he actually had a recovery problem. He actually needed to let his brain rest better so that it would be more capable and more willing of doing that cognitively challenging work. He just couldn't push. His brain was tired. He needed to rest. And his internet browsing, the sort of procrastination he was doing, it wasn't actually cognitively restful for him. So I suggested that he take more small breaks during the day. We did that in a very sort of specific and precise way, but that's the high level of it. We gave him specific time targets and things like that. And in particular, I suggested that he literally leave his house, he go outside, he walk his puppy, who he really loved, that he was training at the time, and then he'd come back and he'd do shorter spurts of cognitively challenging work. But he had a lot of thoughts about what it would mean to take a break like that and to work for shorter periods of time. He had thoughts like, it's lazy, or I'd be a slacker, or I wouldn't be an upstanding person at my job. Of course, again, he was already actually taking breaks. They just weren't actually fun or truly restful ones. And somehow taking fun and restful breaks somehow seemed worse to him, which I'm not even saying that like, oh, he's crazy. I totally get it. It's like, well, if I actually left my desk, if I actually had fun, that's really not allowed. So his core underlying problem was actually a thought problem, because his thoughts weren't allowing him to do something that would be better for him and for his organization. So a big part of our work together at first was just helping him begin to believe intermediate thoughts. Thoughts like, and this was some specific examples of what we worked on, maybe it's possible that it could be better for my job and for my productivity for me to take more breaks and work for shorter periods of time. Just maybe it's possible. We also worked on the thought, maybe it's less lazy. It's possible it's more upstanding to take more breaks and work for shorter periods of time. And when he began to open the door with those little kind of maybes, when he actually believed those maybe it's possible statements, then he could start to try it. He could start to think, okay, this is just an experiment. I'm just going to see. Maybe it could be true. And when you know it, he was more effective in less time, and it was good for him and it was good for his startup. And it was such a win-win to take those breaks. So I just say that to share a really specific example of how the problem is not necessarily the actions. It's often your thoughts about the actions, what you make those actions mean about you as a person, and often about your identity. And I always like to give this little caveat about thought work, because I think when you listen to somebody relate it afterwards, like I do, it's kind of like gymnastics. Like when you see someone who's really good at doing backflips and you see the end result, the whole thing just seems effortless. And I think that's often true of new thoughts. Like when I tell these stories about my clients changing their thoughts, it probably sounds so effortless. Like, well, of course they've come to believe that. But actually the whole process of identifying even the thought that isn't serving you and then gently nudging it to change and then eventually believing a completely new thing, it is tricky. It takes practice. You need coaching. It's going to be like backflips. They didn't backflip the first time. So again, that's just another reason why we will be having 4 months of 90-minute coaching calls in 10 hours back. I just want you to have a ton of opportunities to be coached like this as a client. And of course, if you're changing your own thoughts, I just say this for you to have a lot of patience with yourself about how hard this process can be. But for now, I just want you to ask yourself, do I have thoughts that are holding me back from taking the actions that I know would help me? And maybe just like my client did, you can cultivate some of those maybes, like maybe it would be possible, and begin to allow those possibilities to invite you to take some action. You don't have to believe it would be better. Just maybe it's possible. Maybe I could try it and see. Okay, so that's kind of my overview of the lay of the land when it comes to getting hours down. As I said, first, you need to know what you want and what sounds freaking amazing in work and outside of work. That's vision. Second, you're going to need to take action, both to increase your effectiveness, so you get more work done in the same amount of time. And then you're going to have to reduce your hours by taking action. And third, you're going to have thoughts and feelings and objections and anxieties about the whole thing. And you're going to need to manage your mind on that, or it will derail you for sure. For sure. So I just wanted to share that so you could begin to have a sense of where your issues might be. Like maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I am never mentally sharp when I'm working. Or you're like, I'm never getting to what is most important, or I'm totally procrastinating it. That's why I'm working so long. Or maybe you know exactly what to do to get your hours down, but you mentally feel like you'd be a terrible, negligent employee if you did that. So you need to work on the thought side of things. Again, even just diagnosing the problem more precisely hopefully gives you some places to start and some handholds. And if you want to go deeper on each of these categories, if you want exercises and targeted, doable homework each week and personalized coaching from me on group calls, where you also get to see what a bunch of other really interesting, smart people are doing as they implement these ideas, and if overall you just want to make sure that you actually reduce your working hours, you don't just think about it, you actually get it done, I would like to warmly invite you to join me in 10 Hours Back. 10 Hours Back will be starting in May, and I will be opening the doors for enrollment in April. I will be opening it for enrollment to the waitlist first. And as of this recording, there are more than 2 times as many people in the waitlist as spots in the group. So there's a good chance I may not end up opening it for enrollment to the general public at all. So if it's something you want to be doing, I would recommend getting on that waitlist. You can sign up for the waitlist at katieseaver.com/10 hours back waitlist, or the link is in the show notes. And if you're listening to this podcast way later, but the group still interests you, you can still go to that link. I will put other resources there for you. But for now, I just want to say, I am rooting for you. You've got this. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katieseaver.com. I'd love to meet you.